there, it's Vanessa Warwick of Property Tribes TV, and Property Investor News is a publication that I personally have learnt so much from. So I'm delighted that I'm joined today by the editor, Richard Bowswer. And Richard, we're going to talk about a subject very close to both our hearts, and that is due diligence in property.
Indeed.
And it's always been important to my mind, but now even more so. And there's that great saying, when the tide goes out, you find who's been swimming naked. And the tide is out in property at the moment, isn't it?
Well, it's certainly gone out, and for some people it went out very quickly. Yeah, they've been well and truly caught with their boxer shorts down or whatever, and exposed their business model for what it is and was built on very, very shaky foundations.
Mm-hmm. So I think it's more challenging to get involved in property now, and one of the things that I always say is don't take anybody's word for anything. It's your money, possibly your child's inheritance, your retirement, your pension. Don't let somebody else spend your money for you without fully understanding what they're doing with it.
No, an analogy I've used over quite a number of years is that sadly people are buying significant assets costing hundreds of thousands of pounds, and sometimes they spend about as much time on the research as they would to buying a tin of baked beans off a supermarket shelf, which is absolutely crazy when you think about it. Some of the recent examples of companies that have gone under, and the stories that I've heard would underline that fact, that people just do not do enough fundamental research, basic research into the company and the individual putting forward the sales proposition, whether it be a property portfolio, individual property to purchase in the UK or overseas. They just do not do enough homework, simple, straightforward homework, which quite often can in the space of half an hour. You can company's house records, asking around, getting recommendations, just simple stuff.
There are so many resources that we can use to check. Just putting somebody's name into Google is a good start. Looking at the archive and the back issues of your magazine, posting on a forum like Property Tribes, asking for opinion. I mean, really things that don't take a lot of time, but people aren't even doing these basic things. And you wouldn't go and buy a car without test driving it. Yet some people will buy a property having never seen it, and I cannot understand that.
No, if you think now the desktop tools that we have at our disposal, where we can sit in front of our laptop, our PC, and do a staggering amount of research using all sorts of online tools, as you mentioned already, forums, but the likes of Rightmove, there are all sorts of research tools instantly and easily available. You mentioned Google. You can now go and you can look at the street view. You don't have to drive 3 hours in your car or go on a train. You can literally, from your desktop, pretty much get within half an hour a good feel of what that property is about, that area, the risk factors that you need to consider just in terms of an individual potential property purchase, and of course the vast array of the numbers that you can access, the sort of land registry numbers, all the historic sales, the rental statistics. So you can do an awful lot of research now that 10 or 15 years ago it was impossible. So from that very point of view, maybe, I don't know, maybe it's made people lazy. I don't know. It's crazy to me that people make the sort of decisions that they have been making in the last 3 or 4 years, and got themselves into the difficulties that they have.
And many people say, "Oh, I haven't got time to do it." And I have to say, if you haven't got time to do it, have you actually got time to be involved in property? Because it's not whatever anybody says, it is not a passive, hands-off business. It is a business. It does need your attention, and you need to have ownership of it. And you can't and shouldn't just give all responsibility to somebody else. I think that's just a formula for disaster, really.
Well, if you're using a third party agency of some description to manage individual properties, then it is absolutely imperative that you do a significant amount of due diligence on that company.
Definitely.
To make sure that your highly valued asset, whether it be purely just the lettings management of a property that might be 200 miles away from where you live, or certainly if it comes to the actual property sourcing, clearly, and I don't have a problem with people wanting to have passive approach. It's like anything else in life. If you're prepared to pay someone to manage, but the important thing is you need to do some proper research before you hand over that asset to that individual or company.
No, I totally agree. And I think for me, I believe that to be successful in this game, it's good to be totally immersed in it, and that means being on the cutting edge of learning new stuff. And we can do that through magazines, we can do it through the web, through forums. We really should be constantly taking in new information and understanding what's happening in the marketplace. And basically right now I think all of us should be mending our roofs while the sun's shining, because it's going to get a lot worse, I think.
We are into a challenging period, there's no question about it. The next year or two is going to present challenges to property investor landlords that to some extent one could compare it to the mid to late 70s in terms of the potential environment that we might have. What I'm referring to here is the likelihood of, in the next 2, 3, 5, 7 years, I don't have a crystal ball, the interest rate environment is clearly, to be blunt, the elephant in the room for a lot of over-leveraged investor landlords. And if they don't de-gear, then their exposure to base rate rises and consequent significant rises in their lending costs will mean that they will be in trouble. So those landlords, investors at the moment that have got low base rate trackers, low standard variable rate mortgages, that are and they've got tenants in their properties and they're not experiencing excessive voids or excessive costs. A lot of people are doing very well in terms of rental cash flow. In my opinion, they should make sure that they've got a healthy cash deposit, and also they should be looking to de-gear, to de-risk and mitigate against the forward risks. And the most fundamental forward risk, of course, is the likelihood of interest rate rises and going back up towards the norm. And what I mean by that is reversion to the mean. In other words, base rates up to around 5-6%, lending rates will be around 7 to 8%. At the moment, people are sitting very nicely, lots of people are sitting very nicely on 2.5% or 2.25, being Mortgage Express's reversionary rate, for example. So and as a result, people are doing very well. Their biggest problem at the moment is how to avoid paying as much tax as possible. But that's not going to continue.
No, indeed. So I think that the message from this video today is to constantly learn new stuff. We can never learn less. Keep in the loop of what's happening, understand potential threats that are coming, and be part of the landlord community, because we can all learn so much from each other, can't we?
Absolutely.
And support each other.
Well, there's an old adage about the day you stop learning is the day that you should be, the lid should be coming down.
Absolutely.
So keep an open mind, keep as I say, I don't have a problem at all with with events, with networking events, with landlord events. I've always been a strong advocate of belonging to a landlords association, and I also am positive about events. But as I said earlier, I have issues with some of the sales practices that have been going on in the events market. But certainly, people should immerse themselves if you want to succeed in a competitive environment. This is a period of heightened risk in comparison to 5 or 6 years ago, when property prices were rising, prior to the credit crunch. Everyone thought that it was an endless cycle of prosperity, and clearly now we know differently. Just as those people who were landlords some 18 or 19 years ago, back in the early 90s when we had the previous housing bust, also learnt some harsh lessons, and adapted their businesses accordingly.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for that, Richard. Interesting stuff. You've been watching Property Tribes TV with Richard Bowswer, editor of Property Investor News. Thanks for watching.